Welcome to the third annual Spoken Traditions of Appalachia event, brought to you by Matthew Richards and the Department of Communication. Tonight we have a few speakers here to tell us about their experience in Appalachia and their work with us. Jack Sparlogo, Tanner Lack, Isabel True, Corrick Sissamphone, and special guest Neema Avashia are here to talk with us about a few things that they have experienced in Appalachia. If you could give one big round of applause for the speakers and coming out tonight. And without further ado, let's kick it off and welcome Tanner Lack to the stage.
So I just want to start off by saying I'm not a fan of sandbagging, or I think that poetry should really speak for itself, and that's what I'll be doing today is 3 poems. But with this one, I think that it really comes off as arrogant, and I would like to say that this poem is not about me. Not in the slightest, okay? It really is about us, the imperceivable, perceivable. I feel like if you could imagine what it's going to be like when you die, when things you can't actually get yourself into a headspace anymore, your brain cells are dying, and you just can't perceive. And so this is sort of about how when everything ends on Earth and when we are humans and there is no human that is alive to perceive or to perceive the knowledge that we have recorded, there will just be the Earth, the water, the sky, the wind, and it will all tell its own story. And this is about how it will be the last thing that there is. I am. No notion of being, not bound by logic or philosophy. Dress me in plastic, perfume me with slog, my breath is wind. You, sayers of says, keepers of keeps, build your monuments to those who fame me. Worship your words, try to deconstruct me, but I am. The finest of marble could not capture me, though you tried. The foulest of machines could not stun me. The thickest of poisons could not kill me, though you spread them well. Toxins you brewed in my blood, when balance calls will force an eruption. My torrents of pain will burn the soiled sediments virgin again, and you amongst them. I am you, but you are not me. You are it, you are momentary heres. You are now, and I am always. I am. Language is a glass door that neither side can open. We wipe the glass with textile art of small words. But we see our exterior so clearly, but as we chip away harder, ice never breaks like we thought. Bodies bend with faded reflections, and the divide disappears. We become a single entity until we only ever got as close as our skin could press against cold glass, an excruciating momentary conjunction, entangled in a clear stone cage. When one speaks, the other hears only abandonment. Wet fingers trailing along the ridge of a wine glass, spilling water with each solemn reverberation. Our bodies fortify us with sheltered separation, so spirit can never touch, but it is tempest words that leave it cracked and strained. Words driven in affectionate affliction that left us running down a hallway of crystal gates. How truly maddening it has been to dwell in the realm of invisible walls, thirsty for another being, fearful of the drought desertion would leave behind. We long for the skin of another's sanity, to traverse meadows of gray matter together without the pang of loneliness, without sleeping in fields of frozen spikes. First, we must find the right words. But is language meant to have such meaning? Or is it just another concoction of intellectual infirmity? Maybe glass should just stay glass. I have licked my lips and gashed myself on hopeful shards, letting those jagged tears consume me, succumbing to the sanctuary of my prison. Then, As the opera dies, I love you leaves it shattered. Eggs are poaching on the stove, and the faucet is whispering rhythmic thumps. There, the window, scrubbing dark crevices with distorted light, had a dancing image. The wriggling beads tumbling down a transparent meadow, making jubilant music with each drum of the glass. Why do I shelter myself from such raw beauty? I sit fettered in dark, dreary dryness when a world of color's only guardian is the twist of a latch, the caress between the inner lining of a raincoat and bare skin. Someday I'll reach for you as I feel my crevices deepen and my bones breaking bonds. Thank you.
And thank you, Tanner. Tanner here, he is a senior majoring in electronic media broadcasting here at App State. Tanner is involved with the Lyric App State Poetry Club, as we can all see, and has well deserved the Gold Key from the Scholastic Art and Writing Award for his poetry. Next, I would love to welcome to the stage Jax Barloga. The next speaker here, Jax, is a senior majoring in creative writing. Jax is from the Highlands of North Carolina, and when they aren't climbing or hiking, you can find them out with their three-legged cat, Yardstick. Now that's an adorable name for a cat. I have to say that.
She's got 3 feet.
Oh my god. You see that one right over my head. Obviously, fan, can't wait to see what you have to say. If you want to come on up here, I'll maybe get off the stage.
Hi, so my name's Jax, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from a novella that I wrote. It's kind of a horror novella. It's about a woman who she just got out of jail for accidentally, I'm sorry, trigger warning, killing her son, and she finds a boy about the same age that her son would have been, who has the same name, happens to look like him, and she becomes obsessed with him. So yeah. Hi, can I get a large coffee with 3 sugars in it, please? Thank you, I say to the bored-looking barista. She asks for my name before scribbling it onto the cup and asking for the next in line. A call from an unknown number makes my heart jump. What if it's him? Hello? I answer. Hi, a small male voice said. It sounds like he's been crying. Who is this? It's Daniel. Hi, Daniel, I coo. How are you? Daddy hit me again. Oh, baby, where are you? In my room. Can you meet me in the park in 15 minutes? Okay. He hangs up. I drive to the park, spotting Daniel on the swings again. I park my car before walking up, and he's crying. Hey, Daniel, I say. He wails before running into my arms for a hug. He's warm and soft, and all I can focus on is the feeling of him in my arms. I want to hold him forever. He's the first to pull away. I ate ice cream before dinner, he cries, and Daddy said I had to have a spanking. He said I was a bad boy. Oh, baby, you know that's not true, right? Your daddy hit you because he's mean and likes hurting you. He does? Yes, baby. I'm so sorry. I hug him again. But do you know what? You did the right thing by calling me. We sat in silence for a moment. Hey, Daniel? Yeah? I have some toys I have no use for anymore. Would you like them? Okay. Daniel agrees to meet me at the park again tomorrow night. I want to lavish him with gifts and love and affection, but I need to be careful. Too much too soon will kill him, or would scare him. A neighbor walks out of their home with a full white garbage bag. They look suspiciously at us before throwing it away and going back inside. I can see our head poke through the blinds to look at us. The sounds of a screaming child makes me shake with rage in the toy section of Target, right where I found Daniel. My Daniel would never act like that. The piercing shrieks of a baby an aisle over makes me overstimulated, creating a deep urge to shake them until they stop screaming. I wanted to smack their head against the wall, hold their head underwater, anything to get them to stop. I grab handfuls of different toys, a whoopee cushion, small tins of kinetic sand, and small animal figurines, needing all I can to win him over. Children like presents and toys. Surely he'll be pleased. I make my way towards the Hot Wheels section, taking note of each style and design, and grab as many as I can hold. It's his favorite after all. I'll figure out how to afford my power bill later. It's not even that necessary given how much time I spend watching Daniel. I'm only ever there to sleep, and you don't need electricity to do that. I drive to the park early. We agreed to meet after school. We have a 2-hour window before his parents come home at 5. There's a new Hot Wheels 3-pack in the passenger seat. The wind is blowing my hair into my face. I'm rocking back and forth on the swings, Hot Wheel in hand when the bus drops Daniel off at the corner. It stops and only Daniel steps out. I smile and wave at him and he totters over. His blue bag is as big as he is and covers from his shoulders past his butt. Hi, I smile. Hi, he says. I got something for you. Yeah? Yeah, I smile. What is it? I pull out the Hot Wheels and his eyes light up. I hand it to him and he smiles. Wow, thank you. Now you need to be careful. Your parents will get angry and hit you if you ever show them, so you need to lie and say you got it from a friend if they ever ask. I can be careful, I promise. Good. And I have more of these if you want them. Yes, please. Okay. I smile before frowning again, looking behind him at nothing. Are you usually the only one who gets off here? I ask. Yeah, my sister dances after school and Mama picks her up on her way home from work, so it's just me. Why? Just curious. I enjoy meeting him at the park after school before his parents come home every day. I settle into a routine, sleeping from 8 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon, waiting to meet him around 3 at the park until 4:45, buying his toys and treats after that, and driving over at dusk, parking across the street, and walking through the woods around the backside of the house. I get to watch him eat dinner and get ready for bed, and I sit outside his window while he sleeps at night. The evening is the best part, watching his wide eyes when he steps off the bus and smiles at me. It makes me part of his day, and it makes me something that he looks forward to. What's your name, anyways? He asked, chomping through a Snickers I had bought for him. The sun is burning my face, and I can feel sweat gathering under my armpits from the heat. The air is calm and hot. I feel like I'm trapped in an oven. We're sitting on the swings of the park, and I had just spent the last 10 minutes pushing Daniel as high as I could. He said he could almost touch the sun. I'm called a lot of things. He rolled his eyes. Yeah, but what's your name? I thought for a moment before replying. You can call me Mamo. Mamo? That's a weird name. To each their own. Daniel had just left to go inside, waiting for his parents to come home with Molly when a voice spoke. Excuse me, who are you? Daniel's nosy neighbor shouts at me. She's been watching since she first saw me with Daniel at the park. Oh, hi there. I'm Daniel's new babysitter and tutor. I hang out with him until his parents come home from work. Oh, okay. They didn't mention you. That's not surprising. I'm very new. I wait for Daniel to fall into a deep sleep before I pop open his bug screen. A gentle wiggle is all that is needed. I gently place an individually packed striped Toll House cookie on his windowsill before sliding the screen back into place. He sleeps peacefully for hours until his alarm clock begins to blare at 7 o'clock. He yawns and buries his head under his blanket before finally getting up. He moves like a zombie to the bathroom, shuffling like one of his legs is asleep. He didn't even see my gift. I begin to feel a rage spreading from my chest to my fingertips. Daniel is stumbling less as he walks back into the room. He pauses when his eyes reach the cookies. He walks over, picks it up, turns it in his hand. They were identical to the ones I found in the trash. Surely I'm not wrong. Surely these are his favorite. He checked the package for any holes or openings. He won't find any. They're safe. He opens the package and takes a deep breath, inhaling the sweet treats. Satisfied, he pops one into his mouth, chewing slowly and swallowing before tossing his head back and shoving more into his mouth. Daniel's running to me from the bus, smile on his face at the gift in my hand. It's another Hot Wheel. There's a kid that pokes his head out of the window, neck craned to watch us as the bus pulls away. I can feel his eyes until the bus turns the corner. You haven't told anyone about us, have you? I asked Daniel. I continue to hold his gift, and he looks at me, and then the gift impatiently, waiting for me to hand it over. He shook his head. They would think I'm lying if I tell them. Oh, yeah? Yeah, my own Santa who brings gifts every night? No one would believe me. Well, if they know about us, they'll take me away. What do you mean? We have to keep it a secret, or people will get too jealous and I would have to leave. I don't want that. I know you don't. That's why you need to hide your gifts and be good at keeping secrets. Okay, Mamo. We walk towards the swings where he sits down and immediately looks back to be pushed. Put all my strength in pushing him higher and higher. Mammo? Yes, Daniel. Did you come to my house last night? I did. Is that okay? Yeah, I guess so. He pauses before continuing. Thank you for the cookies. They're my favorite. How'd you guess? Lucky guess. I like lying down on his bed when everyone is away. It is warm and he has a firm mattress and harder pillows than I would prefer, but we all have our preferences. I must know how to make him comfortable when he joins me. I need to buy a new mattress for him, unless I decide he'll sleep in my bed every night. I need him to know that I can take better care of him than anyone else ever could. He will understand. He will understand soon.
Thank you, Jax. Next up, we have Isabel True. She was born in Boone and raised on the backside of Grandfather Mountain. Isabel True took advantage of the mystic beauty Appalachia holds and spent her childhood days building fairy houses and tree stumps and wading through the creeks. She is a writer of fiction, poetry, and many journals. Isabel is now a senior at App State studying elementary education, but continues to write in all the in-between moments. Tonight, she is sharing a few poems that have grown from her time spent in the mountains. She hopes you enjoy.
Hello. Thank you guys for coming out tonight. I'm going to share a couple poems with you. The first one is titled, "The Mountains Are Hungry for Bodies." They like to make a home here, crawling up, nesting in your throat. Less like a songbird, more like a wet winter cough, tugging blankets of smoke over snow-white underbellies. I like to play a game where I tell myself the mountains call me their muse. Like when I am gone, there is something missing from them. They can tell me 100 lies. I'll listen to everyone. Tell me jewelweed bleeds from my veins. Tell me we are still leaving dirt road footprints everywhere we go. This time of year, Appalachia is a static buzz of brown and gray. Roads scabbed with washed up salt, clinging to the asphalt in the cold, bleary sunlight. There are 100 ways to call this beautiful. I'll tell you how the altitude eats at the thin skin over knuckles, rubbing us rough and raw, making landmarks of our body parts till my knuckles mimic the horizon. Say, I know that like the back of my hand, and mean it. Each morning, the top of the knob is frosted over in ice crystals again, and my mother keeps making her soups, and Dad doesn't know how to let go of his axe, except at night when the stars are bright, and we stand in the backyard together. The clouds of our breath saying, look at that, over and over again, as we say nothing at all. Thanks. This second poem I wrote, it was inspired by the gardens outside of my elementary school, where me and my friends would play for hours each afternoon after school got out. And there was a little grove of cherry trees. So in the spring, the petals would turn all pink and fall down onto the grass. And we would build fairy houses in the roots and climb up in the branches. And one day, years later, when I came back and pulled into the parking lot, I saw that they had cut down all the trees. And so this is a poem about growing up. Returning to find the cherry trees have left without me. It takes a while to notice the blossoms, the soft skin of pink petals flowering the dirt, twisted and pulpy beneath footprints. They curve upward, edges heat crimped and reaching, in the dirt no longer dancing. Only the stumps remain, bark flaking in the summer sun, rot sweet at their core, a strange hollow echo of the twisted branches that had made patchworks of the sky. All day the petals wither, each one caught between blades of grass, like stars in the water that fell just before daybreak, like watching memories stutter and sink. Once I danced under boughs bent heavy like a promise, the way you dance before you know what will become. Now, returning is to stand at the edge of a landscape you cannot claim, vast and seeking, watching softness fade with the sun. Thank you. And the last poem that I'm going to share with you guys tonight is called Things I Remember About Being 13. Every September, the apple trees behind school grew heavy with fruit. Bitter and green, we would eat them until we made ourselves sick. There were too many fruits for such a short season. The heat pressed into their skins and they fell, turning mushy in the mulch. Dance backwards 3 times around a pear tree with your eyes closed and you will see a vision of your future love. We linked hands and scraped our shins on sticks and whispered about boys with soft hair who couldn't see us back. Camping in the big field off a neighbor's farm, our parents stayed up late around the campfire, drinking cider and hiding the glowing embers between their fingertips in the larger blaze. We sat knee to knee in the tent, flashlights illuminating the stretched ceiling, and practiced kissing while tasting of apple butter and clumsiness. Trying to climb a tree at a birthday party, I stepped on a nail that pierced right through my shoe into the firm sole of my foot. Too embarrassed to call attention to myself, I limped to the kitchen and sat on the floor, back against the refrigerator as cabinets swung lazily around me. Bleeding for the first time in the middle of winter, the red so at odds with the clean white snow. I hid my body under layers of wool, deep and heavy as a snowstorm. At night, I still prayed, though I wasn't sure to what. To the ferns that clustered the backyard, to the safety of my covers, to what I couldn't know but hoped to become.
Next up, we have Korik Sissamfoam, and because one time just wasn't enough, Korik, a 2-time Appalachian State alum, joins us today to share some of his work. Korik received his bachelor's in 2016 and then his master's in 2019. But wait, there's more. Korik went to teach for 2 years in Edgecombe County, North Carolina. There he taught middle school and high school visual arts and social studies. Korik is going to be sharing some of his first self-published collaborative book, Hoodie Season, Volume 2, with us tonight. Please help me invite Korik Sissamfoam on the stage.
What's up, everybody? How we doing tonight? Good. Thank you for being here. I firmly believe that we are all, in any given moment, exactly where we are supposed to be. Whether that's a accumulation of where we were in the past or a precursor to where we're going to be in the future. So thank you for sharing your energy, your time here with us tonight here at Spoken Traditions. Thank you, Jenna. Thank you to the previous speakers. Thank you, Matt. Love you. And thank you, Neema, for coming and giving us an amazing keynote talk. I'm going to go ahead and manifest how amazing that's going to be. Like she said, my name's Korik. I'm happy to be here tonight, talk to you a little bit, and read a few poems. I published a book last year, so I'm going to read some poems from that. I wanted to talk tonight about change. I've gone through a lot of change over the last couple of years, last year in particular. And I think I'm still in that cocoon, that little metamorphosis of mine. And change is scary. It's frightening. I hate it. I think we all do. And it kind of makes sense, like, from an evolutionary standpoint, like, we survived this long, like I made it 25 years, why change anything, right? But there's a point where change becomes uncomfortable, that comfort is discomfort, that safety becomes the very threat itself, and you have to do something in that moment because all notion of what made sense before from whatever standpoint just doesn't make sense anymore. It's as if a soul stood amidst the blazing sun, conditions scorching heat. Surely the application of additional apparel would implicate absurdity. And yet, two souls, married to individual strife before they ever even meet, join, affix, bond their burdens, nest each other's existence, and christen themselves complete. What do we make of a bird imprisoned, released, recidivistic, seeking to return to its previous conditions? I say this of my siblings: we found our souls within impoverished living. We found our souls within impoverished living. The house foreclosed became our sanctuary. Blood, screams, tears made that screened-in porch our pulpit, and nothing brought us closer in July than that one AC unit. What did we make of a soul imprisoned, released, recidivistic, seeking to return to its previous conditions? Because it's as if we steadily lose the more we make sense. A love I've tried to recreate but haven't been able to since. Concluding, we may forever ask why, but things may never make, like wearing a leather jacket in July. That was a poem by my great friend, creative partner, brother, Derek Stevenson, Derek Lee. He's in the house tonight. Love you, Derek. Derek is a part of the creative writing collective, art collective that I'm a part of. We put out our book last year, and he's somebody who really kind of took me under his wing. He saw the poetry that I was writing and keeping locked away in my phone. And he said, "Why aren't you sharing this? Like, this is amazing." I still don't think it is, but like, I appreciate his affirmation and him pushing me out of my comfort zone a little bit. I first heard that poem 3 years ago in 2019, and I had made some pretty significant changes within my life, and I was wondering if I had made the right ones. And I heard that poem, and I so appreciated how it longed for those simpler times when things weren't as complex. Before you changed and people around you changed and the places around you changed, and I just gravitated towards it, and I saw something in it, and it resonated because for so long I had been chasing this dream that I had when I was, 17 or so. I was going to go become a college professor. I was going to get a PhD, do the whole publishing thing, tenure track, get the prestige, and it was going to be awesome. And then I went to grad school. Yeah, and I'm sure some of you have been to grad school. I had to rethink some things. I found myself in a position where I was anxious 24/7. I was incredibly depressed because of it. I felt like an imposter every single day that I was on campus, doing what I was doing. Or not doing what I was supposed to be doing. And so I made a change. I left academia to go be a teacher. And the irony is not lost on me, I know. I wasn't making great decisions at the time. But, so I took a job teaching art in Edgecombe County, North Carolina. And being from North Carolina, I was like, it's just the other side of the state. And having been in Boone for 7 years, I was like, I know what small towns are like. I've been all over the Appalachian region. And then I parked my car in Battleboro, North Carolina. And I said, damn, my God, there was nothing but dust. I opened my classroom and there was nothing but dust. The desks were turned over on their sides, papers everywhere, a dead mouse. Another dead mouse. I think any rational person probably would have left. But like I said, I wasn't making great decisions at the time. And all I could see was a place where kids were going to laugh, probably scream and throw things because it was middle school. But also hopefully like learn and grow and change and all the good things you're supposed to do as an educator. What I didn't realize was it was going to be a place where I was going to learn and grow and change and do all those good things. The most pivotal moment came during my first year of teaching, I was planning some lessons for the week, and a rapper at the time had just passed away. He was one of my students' favorite rappers, and he passed away due to a drug overdose. May he rest in peace. And so I had the bright idea that I was going to teach a lesson about art and coping and mental illness and how we can use the arts as a way to get these darker, deeper things out of us, besides using like substances and whatnot. And I was staring at this Avashia, red splotch of paint with a crown on top. And I recognized the pain in the painting as it became a backdrop to my thoughts. You might think that they're stained or tainted, but I got why it was off. He was smoking a joint in this picture, and I thought, should I show these kids? Probably not, but lesson plans don't write themselves, and flawed people teach flawed lessons, so like any good hypocrite, I should probably tell them that depression and drug addiction don't mix well, because I learned more about complementary colors by teaching it to them than I ever did through years of hopelessly trying to combine my greens and blues. And so we stumbled through lesson objectives from station to station while they all complained about how poorly he painted. And then an angel came to my desk and blessed me with a canvas of her creation. This painting right here, she smiled, represents my depression. Flawed people teach flawed lessons, and it's probably obvious by now that I am not the smartest. But we all learned something that day. You don't have to be good at art to be a good artist. I hate to be cliche, but those kids taught me more than I ever taught them. And I hope to this day that I have had a fraction of the impact on their lives as they have had on mine. I taught for 2 years. 1.25 of those were in a pandemic, so I'm well familiar with Zoom if anybody needs any help. I'm not offering, but after 2 years, I started to notice the same patterns emerging in my life. I was feeling anxious. I was feeling depressed. I was feeling stuck, stagnant, probably because I went into a career adjacent, but that's a different story. But I knew once again that it was time to make a change. And so I committed. There was a fork in the road. One was continue down this destructive path, the one where you were doing the very thing that you were telling kids not to. Here you are in one context saying, cope with your mental illness through the arts. And here I am going home and lighting up and pouring up every single night until I cannot function because I could not deal with the reality of the situation that I had put myself in. And so I committed to the most transformative year of my life. I decided I was going to leave teaching, and I became a barista because that was something I always wanted to do. I put out a book, which is another thing I always wanted to do. Let's see, I started running, no longer running from demons, but I was like actually running now. Maybe they give me like some fuel. But I quit drugs. Been doing that since like February, so that's pretty cool. Thank you. I found that recovery and running actually have a lot in common. And you can apply a lot of the lessons from one to the other. Things like celebrating small wins and focusing on the long term and gradual growth, things like that. What I thought was really interesting is that a lot of the runs that you will do, all the runs you will do almost during a training program or whatever, are actually called recovery runs. And recovery runs are meant to be easy. Or so the podcast said as I sauntered down the street, a sober stallion stepping to the syncopated rhythm of my own splendor or sadism. But they never spilled the secret on who did the stealing. And a lot of things seem easy. It can be hard to measure ease, 150 beats per minute. The podcast said, you should be able to talk. A hit, an eighth, a half in a week. Well, you should be able to talk. A bowl, a split, an hour or two, an owl or two. You should be able to talk. 60 minutes of meditation every morning. 2 pages of writing. Give your body a chance to adapt, the podcast says. 60 miles in 9 weeks. 5 kilometers in 29 minutes. A dodged relapse. Give your body a chance to adapt. A dodged relapse. A dodged relapse. A dodged. Recovery is meant to be easy. And so, yeah, I'm still a work in progress. I think we all are. But each and every day, I feel a little more confident and a little more assured in the brightness of my own future. And instead of fearing change, I'm learning to run towards it, not from it. And I hope that y'all can too. Thank you.
Final speaker we have here tonight is Neema I just had it, of course. Avashia, thank you. God, you get up here, the pressure's on. But Neema Avashia is here tonight to share some of her book, Another Appalachia, Growing Up Queer and Indian in a Mountain Place. Neema's work gives the readers insight on her background and what it was like growing up as someone whose background only represented 0.5% in the Appalachia community. No summation from me will do Neema Avashia's work justice. So how about we have her come up here and tell us more about what makes her an amazing storyteller and writer.
Thank you everybody for having me. I'm so glad to be here. Before I say anything, I just am hoping we can give another round of applause to these amazing writers. It is not easy to stand up in front of people and make yourself vulnerable and share your stories. So they deserve it. Thanks to Jenna for the intros, and thanks to Matt for putting this amazing event together. I'm really excited to be here for lots of reasons, but not a small reason has to do with football and what's been happening in football over the last couple of weeks when it comes to teams from Appalachia. Which is to say that over the last couple of weeks, I'm sure all of you know what happened with Texas A&M. I don't know if you know that something similar also happened to West Virginia University just a couple weeks later in terms of folks from Virginia Tech having a lot to say about the dental health of people in West Virginia. And watching these sort of very violent and cruel stereotypes get played out again and again on national television and just be espoused by people who in some cases live 20 minutes from the West Virginia border. Blacksburg is part of Appalachia. They don't seem to know that, but it's part of Appalachia. Just for me confirms what I was trying to do in this book, which is to say, I grew up Indian in Appalachia, and when I left Appalachia, no one believed me when I said I was from Appalachia. Literally, people would be like, there are no Indian people in Appalachia, what are you talking about? And for a long time, I was like, well, okay, I'm pretty sure I'm from there, but sure, you have your perception, and it's wrong, but I don't know how to combat that, right? I mainly just ended up feeling like I was an anomaly. And it wasn't until about 2015 that I realized I actually couldn't just stick with being the anomaly, but that there actually needed to be a different narrative being told. In 2015, some of you Appalachian Studies folks know, is the year that the book Hillbilly Elegy was published. And I was living in Boston, and all these supposedly like progressive and liberal people around me were picking up that book and being like, this book explains everything about Appalachia. And I was like, it explains nothing about Appalachia. I don't recognize anyone in this book. This is not a memoir. It's like a political platform. This person wants to run for office. It's really clear to me what's happening here. But like, you don't get it. And I kept thinking about like, why don't they get it? Why don't they get it? And I was like, well, they don't get it because one, most folks have never been. Or they're, oh, I've been to Appalachia, it's like I've driven through, right? The number of people who are like, oh, I've driven down 79. I'm like, well, okay, you haven't been. And then the other problem is that the mainstream narrative around Appalachia just holds up those stereotypes again and again. Hillbilly Elegy was on the New York Times bestseller list for over a year. Most books, that does not happen. It's been over 52 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. It has captured the narrative. So when you see that young man at Texas A&M, or when you see that news reporter in Blacksburg putting those stereotypes out there, I kind of draw a straight line between that narrative coming from individuals and the mainstream narrative around Appalachia. And the only way I can think of to disrupt that narrative is to do what folks are doing here right now, which is not to write another definitive explainer about Appalachia, because there isn't one. No one book can define any place or any region or any people. But what does it look like for us to tell enough stories and tell them in such a quantity and in such a volume that it basically makes it impossible for anyone to think that there is a definitive book about Appalachia? That's kind of what I was thinking about when I wrote this book. And my goal is, even if people don't bother to read it, if you look at the cover, you're never going to think about Appalachia the same way. This is Babcock Mill, which is, if you're from West Virginia or know West Virginia, Babcock Mill is a pretty iconic state park. Every Appalachian family has a picture. Most of those families are not Indian, but on the cover of this book is my Indian family in a really iconic place. You don't have to read any further than that. If you look at this cover, hopefully something happens in your brain and you're like, wait a minute, Appalachia's not what I thought it was. Something is different than what I think it is. So that's kind of what I was trying to do with this book. It's what I'm so excited to see happening here, right? Is this idea of like anothers, right? Appalachia is full of anothers. How do we make those stories the ones that people hold on to? How do we make those stories the ones that people think of first? And then disrupt their brain and make them be like, well, that stereotype can't be true because I know all these other stories. And those stories make it so this stereotype is impossible. And so I wanted to read you an essay today. That was I originally wanted to title this book A Hindu Hillbilly Elegy, because I'm really petty. And my very wise publisher was like, please don't do that, it's a bad idea. So it's still the title of two different essays in the collection. He couldn't get me out of that. So the essay I'm going to read you today is called A Hindu Hillbilly Elegy. 1. When I hear the first strains of Om Jai Jagadish Hare, I'm instantly 5 years old again and racing around the exterior of the South Charleston Junior Women's Club with my friends. We throw salted peanuts into cups of Coke and scream with joy at the ensuing eruptions of brown foam, only stopping when ordered into the building by our parents for the final stage of the puja, the arti, the moment when light is offered to the deities. Out of breath and sticky-handed, we push our way to the front of the room, where photos and idols cluster on a small table weighed down by offerings of fruit and sweets. Aunties in silken saris hold a flat silver thali decorated with designs made in rice and vermilion powder, upon which small cotton balls dipped in ghee have been lit. One by one, we approach them and take hold of one side of the thali, keeping our eyes on the flames and the idols as we move the thali through the air. First left, then right, then counterclockwise. As each of us finishes, we pass one hand over the flame, then over our heads, a motion ingrained in our muscle memory. Around us, elders clap their hands and sing the arti full-throated. We're a motley crew, this band of Hindus, gathering once a month to pray in southern West Virginia in the mid-1980s. Our families immigrated to the United States from all over India, sometimes by way of Kenya, Tanzania, or Uganda. Work as engineers or physicians has brought us to this tiny state whose W our parents confuse with V because we don't have a W sound in our home languages. In their mouths, West Virginia often becomes West Virginia. We live in a valley nestled by a river whose name we also struggle to pronounce. Kanawha, another W to deal with, in topography wholly unfamiliar to us. The leaves changing color each fall and then drifting to the ground in crunchy piles is a phenomenon that will perpetually fill us with amazement. Our immigration to almost heaven, West Virginia, began in the late 1960s. By 1990, Asians made up 0.4% of the state's 1.7 million person population. Cut that number in half, eliminating the Filipino, Chinese, and Korean communities, and you have the number of South Asians in the state. Cut that number down to Indians of the Hindu faith, and you have less than 2,000 people statewide. A single Christian megachurch in my hometown had as many members in its congregation as our entire faith did in the state. Hinduism, in its non-polemicized form, is a loose amalgam of texts, mythologies, philosophies, and rituals. It isn't held together by a pope or a network of clergy. Our priests act as conductors of ritual, not spiritual advisors. In truth, our religion is largely self-directed and individualized, which is fine when you live in a country where many of the other 1 billion inhabitants also practice their faith that way, where there's a temple on every corner, and your religion's holy days are state-sanctioned holidays. Adherence to the faith proved much more difficult for me, often the only Hindu in a crowd of Christian classmates. I know this is not just a Neema problem. Nearly every week I see an article proclaiming the erosion of faith in America. But that erosion, in my case, was both enacted upon me and by me. 2. I heard that people like you worship cows. I was in elementary school the first time somebody hurled this phrase at me, much the same way a bloody cow's head had been hurled at the door of our makeshift temple in the basement of a house once in the 70s. How does a child explain faith to another child? We don't worship cows, we just think they're sacred. Worship? Sacred? To a Christian kid in West Virginia with limited vocabulary, what was the difference? My polytheistic faith was incomprehensible. The blue gods, the ones with elephant heads, the ones whose stories my mother recounted and I hungrily devoured, were mocked by my classmates and the world outside our home. Why don't you eat meat? They would ask, eyeing my fluorescent yellow lemon rice, stained by turmeric and packed in a biohazard Ziploc bag my thrifty father had taken from the chemical plant. The orange skull and crossbones on the front did nothing to ease my outsider sadness. Hindus don't believe in violence. Killing animals is a form of violence, so we don't eat meat. I gave them the same answers my parents had given me when I asked at our dinner table. But the answers I accepted unquestioningly didn't suffice. What if plants have feelings? What if that carrot is actually screaming when you cut into it? Aren't you committing violence then? Again, I failed to know how to explain. So much of culture and faith had been automated for me, much as they had been for my Christian peers, that I couldn't provide reasoned responses to their questions. It never occurred to me to turn the microscope on them, on their faith, on their culture. Such is the curse of being the minority during childhood, I suppose. It never feels quite safe to challenge dominance in that way. Instead, their shaming questions prick tiny holes in my nascent faith, tapping any reserves built up at home and at puja. 3. My bedtime routine as a child was the same every night. My mom came into my room and patted me on the back as she sang Gujarati and Sanskrit bhajans to me. I fell asleep each night to the sounds of Raghupati Raghav and Vakratunda Mahakaya, learning the words long before I learned the meanings. When I sought to understand instead of just parrot and deliberately asked my mom to translate word for word, pushing her knowledge of Sanskrit vocabulary beyond its limits, I sometimes found that the songs didn't resonate for me. Singing about Ganpati's curved trunk, round body, and brilliance of 100 suns didn't fill me with a sense of spirituality. It was my mom's voice that convinced me all was right in the world, not the words that she was singing. I remember wanting desperately to emulate her piety, but failing to understand the source of her devotion. I sang the songs, replicated the rituals, hoping to capture the same holiness I saw on her face when she stood at the altar in our kitchen. Still, no matter how hard I stared at my reflection in the tiny silver idols, I never saw the same look mirrored on my face. But I'd be lying to you if I told you that I don't sing those bhajans to myself at night when I have trouble sleeping, or that I don't say a quick prayer every time I board a plane, asking God to forgive my mistakes and keep me safe, or that I didn't listen to Raghupati Raghav, Gandhi's favorite hymn, on repeat 6 years ago when my cousin committed suicide at the age of 30, and I inexplicably set up the idols on my altar in front of his picture, lit incense, and sang along. 4. A sampling of conversion attempts by Christians in chronological order. 1986, a neighbor invites me to attend Sunday school with her. I pressure my mom into letting me go, and after a few sessions, find myself up at the altar being saved. My mom never lets me go back to Sunday school again. 1992. My middle school basketball coach forces our team to say the Lord's Prayer before every game. Participation is not optional. I can still recite it verbatim today. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. 1994. A Mormon high school classmate sends blonde-haired, black-suited missionaries to my house. My parents keep the Book of Mormon that is proffered, unsure of how to turn it down, but politely send the missionaries on their way. 1996. A friend invites me to a Super Bowl party at her church. All goes well until halftime, when the pastor turns off the television and asks for people to bow their heads, then encourages people in the room who are ready to accept Jesus into their hearts to raise their hands. I am the only person in the room who is not already a member of the church. I squeeze my eyes shut tight, keep my head bowed, and count the minutes until halftime is over and the game begins again. And then there is the constant question asked every time our brown-skinned family attends a gathering of white West Virginians. Have you been saved? Have you been saved? Have you been saved? The litany is exhausting. The holes in the fabric of my faith grow larger. I don't seek to patch them up with Christianity. I simply wish I did not have to explain or justify my inherited, out-of-place identity. 5. My favorite family photo depicts 3 Indian couples on an autumn road trip. The men, complete with shocks of thick black hair and patterned bell-bottom pants, the women with luxurious braids and chanlos painted on their foreheads, stand in front of a log grist mill, the red and orange leaves of West Virginia fall scattered around them. Their children, ranging in age from infancy to 10 years old, squirm on laps and scramble towards the edges of the frame. Each fall, my parents organized a trip to a state park in West Virginia for us and the other West Virginia Gujaratis who became our inherited family. At Pipestem or Hawk's Nest or Blackwater Falls, we hiked through deciduous forest, waded in creek beds, rode horses, and sang Bollywood songs and Hindi bhajans by the light of a campfire. We ate khichdi for dinner and Tees Valley biscuits for breakfast. Through these trips, I grew to love the wild and wonderful aspects of West Virginia, even as I struggled with the religious and racial elements. Its natural beauty settled into my sensory memory right next to the Hindu puja. West Virginia is the only home I know, though it's not a home that always loves me back. The same holds true for many of my peers from the Hindu hillbilly crew, the rowdy children who played until it was time to go in for puja. While the tug of war between the culture of their homeland and the culture of their new home certainly existed for my parents and their friends, the impact on their identities seemed far less extensive than it was for the Indian American young people of my generation. By the time our parents moved to America, their identity formation was largely complete. Their work, in some senses, was about recreating the sensory experiences and rituals of their past. But they always had their past as a point of reference. For young people in our community, the challenge was different. As adolescents, deep in the throes of identity formation, holding to our parents' religious faith was much harder. We didn't have the same emotional attachment to the rituals, the sensory memory of what those holidays actually felt like, or what it felt like to share holidays with family. We had modified rituals, simulations of holidays, held in incongruous spaces with fluorescent lighting and shiny linoleum flooring. My mom waxes nostalgic about doing Navratri Garba for all 9 nights growing up in India. I only know the experience of 2 weekend Garbas held in the same middle school gymnasium where I took phys ed from Monday to Friday. If anything, the closest approximation to faith for me might be the omnipresent pull to go home to the mountain state. The way the colors of a West Virginia fall still render me breathless. How the lyrics of Country Roads evoke an enormous lump in my throat. It is the hillbilly part of my upbringing that has stayed with me, even as many of the Hindu elements slowly fall away. 6. One year, when my sister and I both inhabited the teen sector of the age spectrum, my parents decided it wasn't enough for us to just visit family on our sporadic trips to India. We needed to see the country more broadly. They took us on a trip to South India, a trip on which I often found my angsty teen self moaning, "Not another temple," or "not another palace." My aversion stemmed partially from being a teenager, and so opposed to any idea my parents had. But I also felt disturbed by the rules that many temples posted out front. Menstruating women were not allowed to enter. Women whose clothing showed their shoulders or legs were not allowed to enter. Men wearing pants and not lungis, a kind of male sarong, were not allowed to enter. I wore gaudy jam shorts and a white t-shirt. My sister had on a sleeveless, shapeless dress. My father wore his usual pants and collared shirt. Vendors outside the temple hawked rented lungis and scarves, urging my father to take them. He barked at them angrily, muttering, "I'm not giving you money for that dirty fabric." Effectively, at each of these temples, the only person allowed to enter was my mom, dressed in the traditional sari. The rest of us had to wait for her outside. Waiting outside only served to further my discomfort. Hungry children in tattered clothing looked at us with pleading eyes, bringing their hands to their cracked lips in an eating gesture. Flies buzzed around the head of a man suffering from elephantiasis, a condition caused by parasitic worms that resulted in his legs swelling to a massive proportion, like those of an elephant, rendering him immobile. The contrast between the smooth, indulgent marble and gold of the temple and the ashy, wrinkled texture of the skin stretching over the pauper swollen leg was too much for me to handle. This wasn't the warm and communal Hinduism of the junior women's club that I knew and loved. This was organized, institutionalized religion with all its class and gendered hypocrisies. And suddenly, I wasn't so sure I wanted to be Hindu anymore. 7. I thought I knew the rituals of Hindu weddings well. The circles my sister and her future husband Kumar would take around the fire. The 7 steps they would take, making a vow with each step. I knew that our brothers would throw rice into the fire to symbolize their support of my sister as she entered married life. But typing up English translations of the various phases in the ceremony, I reached a stage that confounded. The point in the ceremony where married women were supposed to approach my sister and whisper this phrase, Akanda Sobhagyavati, into her ear. Mom, how would you translate Akanda Sobhagyavati? I asked. My mom answered without hesitation. It means, may you die before your husband. I'm sorry, what? It comes from the time when women were still forced to commit sati if their husbands died before they did. So women would wish each other an early death in order to avoid the prospect of being burned on the funeral pyre. Her tone was calm, clear, and matter-of-fact. Meanwhile, my 22-year-old brain filled with righteous feminist rage. My sister, in the final months of her final year of residency, did not have time to engage in this level of detail when it came to her wedding. It was up to me to delete this description from the program. We're not doing that, I proclaimed, pounding delete on the keyboard for emphasis. My mom was adamant that the ritual of women blessing the bride remain part of the ceremony, so we found a compromise. In accordance with my mom's wishes, on my sister's wedding day, 9 women from our community approached my sister and whispered in her ear. In accordance with mine, instead of saying the Akanda Sobhagyavati of previous generations, they whispered their own personal wishes for a happy and successful marriage. I watched proudly from the first row, feeling for once like I'd managed to merge the traditions of my heritage with the ethos of my American upbringing. 8. In my adult life, ritual has fully supplanted faith when it comes to the question of religion. My partner Laura is a product of a Catholic father and a Jewish mother. In October, we go to Navratri Garbas held in middle schools in the northern suburbs of Boston. In November, we celebrate Diwali by cooking a big dinner and setting off illegal fireworks. We have a menorah and a Christmas tree in our living room in December, and the tree is decorated with a hodgepodge of ornaments representing a set of identities that could only happen in our home. A menorah and an ohm, Brooklyn and West Virginia, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Frederick Douglass, pickles, pizza, and rainbows. A tiny altar sits in our pantry upon which reside Hindu idols, along with a glass Jesus that a student gave me as a gift. Guilt prevents me from discarding it. Sometimes Laura comes home to the pervasive smell of incense. Sometimes I fry up a batch of latkes to celebrate Hanukkah. But rarely, usually only in the case of a marriage, a funeral, or a high holiday, do either of us cross the threshold of temples, synagogues, or churches. And when it came to our own marriage, the decision to have a very secular, very simple wedding was easy for us to make, but difficult for my family to handle. The night before the ceremony, my sister said to me, "It's really hard for me that there will not be any vidhi at your wedding." But neither Laura nor I could imagine a ceremony where we turn to deeply religious, deeply gendered rituals to commemorate our queer, secular relationship. Still, some elements of my childhood faith are hard to let go of. Last summer, Laura and I made one of our favorite drives through the Fort Pitt Tunnel, a dimly lit cavern of concrete and tile that spits drivers out onto a bridge with a stunning view of the minuscule but well-placed Pittsburgh skyline. She loves the drive because it reminds her of the perks of being a wallflower and the feeling of being infinite. I love the drive because it reminds me of childhood trips to Pittsburgh for Indian groceries, a visit to the Hindu temple, and a momentary reminder that there are indeed places in America where Indians make up more than 0.2% of the population. You know where Hindus on the East Coast ask for their ashes to be scattered? I asked. Pittsburgh, I'm guessing? Yeah, but do you know why? She didn't. Why would she? Pittsburgh is the Triveni Sangam of the East Coast, the place where 3 rivers meet. In India, the most holy place for ashes to be scattered is at the confluence of the Yamuna, the Ganga, and the Saraswati rivers. Pittsburgh is the American equivalent, the site where the Monongahela and the Allegheny converge to form the Ohio. My mom wants her ashes to be scattered in Sedona, Arizona, And I know that after my father's death, his ashes will be scattered at this confluence. So too will those of my American citizen aunts and uncles. This Triveni Sangam is my family's burial ground. The Judeo-Christian concept of burial is something I can't get my head around. A slow, suffocating decomposition at the hands of soil and worms. I briefly considered the Zoroastrian method, having my body placed on top of a mountain for birds to take heavenwards in their beaks, but this seems both bloody and impractical. In the end, this Hindu ritual is what I want. Cremation. Ashes, the throwing of a blessed coconut in the water, the utterance of hymns I've been singing since childhood. A way to return to the mix of Hinduism and Appalachian heritage that have defined me from the beginning. Scatter my ashes in Pittsburgh, I told Laura. From Pittsburgh, those ashes will float downstream, winding west, then south to Wheeling, Moundsville, Parkersburg, Ravenswood, and eventually to Point Pleasant, where they will mingle with the waters of the Kanawha, slowly carrying me homewards. Thank you.
If you want to hang out,
Yeah.
We have time for questions. If you guys want to go ahead and ask Neema some questions,
Or any of the other
or
writers.
anybody else. Yeah, absolutely.
How did your family get to West Virginia?
Union Carbide.
Oh, okay.
So my dad did his residency in Queens, New York, which is where most Indian folks came through New York. And Union Carbide had their headquarters in Manhattan. And they were looking for an occupational medicine physician to work at one of their plants. And there were two options. One was Institute, West Virginia. One was Seadrift, Texas. And Institute was closer to New York at the time. So that was it. That was like, it was like, here's the job, this is where we're going. There really wasn't a lot more to it. At the time, most immigrant doctors were really being placed in either very rural areas or very urban ones. Kind of the places where American-born doctors didn't want to go is where immigrant doctors ended up. So that's kind of, there wasn't much more to it than that. Yeah.
Were you openly queer when you lived in Appalachia?
No, and I would say that like even like the word queer when I was growing up was a slur that people used, right? It was not a way of being that like I had any exposure to. Not to say there weren't queer people, but they weren't visibly out. And it took like really until college before I met my first queer West Virginians. And that was Pittsburgh, and I think a lot of people like from West Virginia had left and moved to Pittsburgh as like a place where it was like a little bit easier to be out. But no, not at all. I think there was a lot of silence around queerness in the 80s and 90s, probably everywhere. I mean, you also have to think about the fact that it's like the height of the AIDS epidemic, right? So if there was conversation about queerness, it was in the context of like fear and death. It was not in the context of like love or community or any of those things. And it took me a lot longer to figure out who I was because like there are other essays in the book that kind of talk about this, but like I didn't have any models. I knew that like the models that existed, my family's models of like gender, and then also the sort of like classmate and peer models, like none of it was working for me. But I just didn't have words to know like, okay, what does this mean? So it took a lot longer, I think, because of that. Yeah.
How long did it take you to write this book?
That's a great question. So I started in 2015, and I submitted to different places for publication in 2020. So it took me 5 years. I have been a middle school teacher for 19 years, and as you heard a little bit, teaching can be very all-consuming. So finding time was hard, but it sort of was just like this slow and steady process. But yeah, it took 5 years. And I think actually that was the writing. I think the thinking probably took all of the life before that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are you excited about for the future of Appalachia?
I am so excited about the sort of like passion and conviction and organizing I see from Appalachian folks around like making Appalachia the place they want it to be. I feel a lot of hope, which I know sounds strange because the policy landscape right now is really bleak. But the level of resistance, the level of volume of that resistance, the way in which people are building community with each other and supporting each other gives me a lot of hope. it's not, there isn't silence anymore, right? That silence I was talking about that was like the dominant feeling when I was growing up was like no one was talking about anything. That's not the case anymore. And so the fact that it's not silence and the fact that there's like a really, really thoughtful and intentional conversation going around about what does it look like to make this a place that's for everyone, gives me a lot of hope. On Friday, I'm driving to Hazard, Kentucky, where there's this awesome event happening. It's called the Appalachian Big Ideas Festival. And it's like all these incredible organizers and writers and thinkers and like doers from Eastern Kentucky who are getting together to like talk about their work and connect with one another, right? People are finding those spaces and they're finding one another. And I think that's just really powerful. And I think the more that happens, the more of a counter you build to this like really incredibly difficult policy landscape. So I think that it is, you have to hold those two things in the balance, but I guess I choose to sort of like think about like all of this organizing that's happening and the fact that it just feels to me like that is a wave that's only gonna get bigger and bigger. Yeah.
So you had mentioned you had a sister, right? And it sounds to me she grew up rather traditionally. Did that add any discourse between the family dynamic?
Yeah, my sister's 7 years older than I am. And I think about a lot that like, you know, she went first. So like anything that was hard for me was infinitely harder for her. And I think our ways of navigating that hard were different from each other. I think her way was to try to like make everybody happy. And I think my way was to be like, F everybody. Like, I can't, I don't know how, so I'm not going to. So I think we're really different because of that. I think birth order plays a role in that too. There was just a lot more pressure on her. But yeah, I do think, and I think this particularly in the context of queerness, like it has been hard for my family to get their head around because like my parents are traditional, my sister's very traditional. And it's like not to say that they don't love me or they're not trying to figure it out, but it is definitely work for them to figure it out. Yeah.
You were talking about fiction and the role that you see stereotypes of this region in fiction. What role do you think movies and TV, because I think they reach a much larger audience?
Yeah, well, a lot of times. Yeah, and I think, unfortunately, a lot of time also what happens is those books that are on the New York Times bestseller list end up being the thing that gets made into the Netflix movie too, right? So it's kind of what we saw with Hillbilly Elegy. You got like a double dose of exposure there. Yeah, I think it's, I think it is damaging now. I think it's been damaging for a long time. When I was little, it was the Beverly Hillbillies, right? Like, it's not like that's, it's not new. It's like this ongoing, really flat stereotype representation. And I think there are like moments where you see some interruption of it. Like, I think Dope Sick tried to do a really good job of like really building understanding and empathy of what like the opioid crisis did to Appalachia. Like, I think that you see those moments, but Beth Macy's also from Appalachia, right? So she's an Appalachian writer, writing stories that she knows really well and writing to sort of like build that understanding. And I'm so glad that her work is getting the sort of attention and volume that it's getting. We need like so much more of that. But I do think there are also really good examples. Ashley York is a great filmmaker who made a documentary. This is all Crystal's class. Everyone should take Crystal's class. Crystal Carter back here is an incredible thinker and teacher and really pushing to get people to think differently about Appalachia and like what the diversity of Appalachia is. But Hillbilly is a great documentary that really kind of gets into like how the visual representations of Appalachia over time have kind of served to perpetuate these stereotypes. And she really asked the question about why. Like, what's it for? Who does it benefit to have these be the stereotypes? And her analysis, and I think she's right, is that when you stereotype a place and when you reduce it and you flatten it, it makes it easier to do bad things to that place and to those people. So it's easier to destroy the natural environment. It's easier to strip resources from a place. It's easier to like deny resources to a place. It's easier to let workers suffer because in your head, you don't see the people who live there as human. They're not as human as you are. That stereotype is taken away their humanity. And so I think that's not like, I think that's her analysis, and I think it makes a lot of sense as to why we see that stereotype get played out again and again. It's because it's financially beneficial. The same people who are funding those movies are also making money and also have their stocks invested in corporations that are doing a lot of harm here. So fully, I think that the visual media plays a big role. I can't imagine that there will ever be a movie or a TV show about Indian people in Appalachia. Like, I'm just realistically, like, there's no world in which I think that will ever get made, because I think it would disrupt too many of those ideas, right? Like, it's too hard for people to hold in their head. I think we also suffer from an assumption by, like, a lot of, both, like, in the publishing world and in the media world, people not having a lot of faith in readers or viewers, or that, like, readers and viewers can handle complexity, that readers and viewers, like, don't need, like, really flat ideas, like, they can handle things that are more than one thing. Like, you can write a book about a place that both you love deeply and also you have deep questions about, like, that complicated idea. It's not that complicated, it's how all of us feel, but I do think in the mainstream publishing world, they don't trust that people can handle that complexity. They'd rather just sell you a flat story because that's what they think we can handle. Yeah.
Are you working on writing anything now?
Yeah, I'm working on a second essay collection. It's tentatively titled The Book of Broken Rules, and each essay looks at, like, a rule that was conveyed to me about race or gender or class or sexuality, and then, like, what happens when you're the person who's just like, I'm not going to follow that rule. I don't want to do that thing. And the consequences that happen when you're sort of living your life that way. Yeah.
So, in your journey of dealing with certain religious precepts and cultural precepts living in Appalachia, did you ever rediscover or find a spirituality that worked for you and with queerness?
No, it's a great question. I wish. Yes, no, not at all. I mean, I think, like, one of the hardest journeys of adulthood for me has been feeling like the rituals I was raised with don't work for me. But, like, there are times in your life when you need rituals. Like, rituals serve a function, right? Particularly around, like, moments of deep emotional intensity. Like, it's like, my brain can't do this, so the ritual takes my body through it, and it's like my body going through is what helps my brain go through, right? So what do you do when then, like, those rituals don't work for you? Your brain still can't go through it, and your body's like, I don't know what to do. We don't have a thing here, right? You end up trying to make your own, trying to, like, figure out, like, what does it mean, particularly I think this with death rituals. Like, how do we honor people? How do we grieve them in the absence of death rituals that are grounded in a religious faith? I think a lot of us really actually are grappling with that, where for whatever range of reasons, like, that faith tradition doesn't work for us, but those are the only death rituals we know. And so then your grief kind of gets, like, stunted or stilted a little bit because you don't have access to the rituals to help you move through it. So I try to make up my own. Like, I don't know, like, I think I am always trying to figure out how to help my body move through grief, when in the absence of the things that help people who are religious move through grief, because I don't have those things. There's a whole essay in this book about trying to do that and failing miserably, but, like, trying to recreate a ritual or trying to do that, and, like, what happens when you try to make rituals for yourself. I wish I had an answer that felt better. I think it's a really hard question that a lot of us are grappling with.
Hard answers need hard questions need long answers.
Yeah, and long lives, right? I mean, I often say, like, there are no answers in this book. There's just a whole lot of questions, and then, like, me thinking about the questions. Because I think the answers are probably another 20 years away. Yeah.
You're very funny. And the reason I'm saying that is because don't count out the story about the Indian in West Virginia, because HBO has 2 seasons of a comedy series called Southside, which is based in Englewood, which is one of the worst neighborhoods in Chicago. Abbott Elementary is about under-resourced elementary school. I think that there's actually a thirst for those stories that show the reality of our bigger world.
Yeah.
And so I just, I can see it.
All right. I'm glad you can see it. I will continue to be, I just think proportionately, like when you think about the volume, like just even thinking about like an outlet like the New York Times, right? The New York Times does not review books by Appalachian writers. And even when they do, their reviews are often like kind of disrespectful. There was a great book that came out called Appalachian Reckoning, which is a series of essays responding to hillbilly elegy. And it did get covered in the New York Times, but in a like kind of backhanded way. You know, it was like, oh yeah, this thing happened. And then it was like, it was kind of disrespectful. And so like, as long as that, and that book by and large, most of the essays in there were by white Appalachian folks. Not all, but a lot. So if that's the reception of a book that's by sort of like who people see as dominant in Appalachia, I think it's just, yeah, hard to imagine. I think things would have to move on. I hear you. I think like there are tons of really great shows. Reservation Dogs, if you haven't seen it, is like such a good example of that, right? I do think you're right about that. I think the particularity of Appalachia is almost like a complicator in that way, where it's like, it pushes so hard on that dominant perception. I don't know.
And I guess I look at Englewood as the same.
Yeah.
I mean, like Englewood is a very troubled neighborhood. My grandmother came from Englewood, so it's important to me. But you know, and I think I mean, you're funny, and I think you could be the person who opened that world for the rest of us.
From your mouth to Hollywood's ears. All right. Thank you all so much for being here.
What a truly amazing group of speakers we had tonight. I just want to give one more round of applause to them if we could. And special thanks to Matthew Richards for putting on this event. Stay tuned, I guess, sort of, for more stuff coming out from him, the Department of Communications. He puts on these amazing speaker events that allow Appalachian students and anyone around to just share their voice and give them a platform. So we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
How I got to Appalachian State is a really funny story because I grew up in Northern Virginia. My parents both educators. My dad was an elementary school principal, my mom a kindergarten teacher. Never heard of Appalachian State in any way, shape, or form. And so then we took piled it in the car and headed down. And as soon as I crossed the mountain, it was funny, they had a snowstorm. I remember crossing over the mountain and just being like in awe. It was just, it was beautiful. And so we took the tour and walked around, and I realized this was a great place for me. Not only was it just the right feel, but what really struck me, for me personally, was that it was 6 hours away. And I knew that there was no hope that I would be going home on weekends. I couldn't wait to get to college. I couldn't wait to get, away from home and start living life. And Boone was a dry county, which I didn't realize when I put in my application. That was one of the things that I got a lot of grief from my friends on. Like, how in the world did I end up in a place that didn't have alcohol? But anyway, so I got there, and so it was kind of a different environment. It wasn't anything I was used to, and it was a lot of fun. I tell kids now when I meet kids or parents that have kids that are thinking about going to school, that there's no better place in the world to go to college than Appalachian State. So when I got to App State, my thought was business. I was going to be a business major, go into marketing, sales. This is my future. And then I met Dr. Randy Edwards, and that changed my whole life because I could not get through accounting. And he had every reason and every right to send me on my way. So I realized after spending 2 years as a business major that I needed to do something else. So I thought, criminal justice, that's the way. And that was actually the best decision I could have ever made. But just it was the courses I enjoyed a lot more. Not only the criminology courses, but that also got me in the political science realm, that got me in history, sociology, psychology, all those things kind of came together, and those are courses I really enjoyed. So when I decided to go into criminology, or criminal justice, originally it was to be a lawyer. I wanted to go to law school. And as I continued my ongoing struggles to make class and to do my assignments and the academic side of college life, I realized that there was no way I was going to law school. So what's plan B? Well, plan B for me was doing an internship with a company founded by former Secret Service agents. I met a guy playing church softball named Tom Pacusa and said, "Hey Tom, I know you work for a security company. Is there any chance that they would be willing to take on an intern?" So fast forward, now it's late 80s. I said, well, we're in the middle of hiring some folks, so we can offer you a job at $10 an hour, and you can get on the phones and work on the hiring line. And then a month later, they offered me my first full-time job at $20,000 a year, and I thought I'd hit the lottery. It was great, and I spent 15 years there, worked my way up to managing director before I left to start my career and start a security program at Mars Incorporated. And in that process, I went on to travel the world, and so I've run protective operations in over 80 countries, and that's how it all started. So as I've told people before, and I was the ultimate bad alumni. I was the guy that skirted the calls, never sent. I think I sent money in one time to the Yosef Club. I think I sent $30 one time, and I was at the beach, and it was Labor Day weekend, and we're watching App State in Tennessee, and I'm getting excited. I'm getting fired up. I'm starting to yell and scream and get loud. Unfortunately, we didn't win, but what did come out of that was my son-in-law looked at me and he said, "I would love to go to a football game down there." And I said, "Well, I haven't been back in," I couldn't even remember how long it had been since I'd been back. So I said, well, let me reach out. I'll make a phone call. We'll see about getting tickets. Called. Got this guy, Brian Tracy, answers the phone and he said, "Well, we'd love to host you for a game," So I went down and I saw Texas State. We get there, and again, the way the university had grown, the growth of the university, I was blown away. I mean, I was blown away how amazing it looked. I got to meet Doug Gillen. I loved Doug's enthusiasm. I loved his vision. And then from Doug, I got to go up farther and was introduced to Dr. Sherry Everts. And immediately meeting Sherry, I got the same passion. The vision and her vision for what she wanted Appalachian State to become. When you make an investment, you make an investment in the people. And for me, it was an easy investment between Sherry and Doug and Brian and everything that was going on. So it was just an easy way to get involved. And I was fortunate enough that they welcomed me and yeah. So when I got to meet Sherry and Doug, and I got to be involved more with the university, I got to be privy to some opportunities, and they asked me to be on the board. And that was something that I never even dreamed of. I was blown away. It was an honor. I'm still, every day, I still just shake my head and can't believe that I get to be part of that. You have all those people with all this passion and all this excitement for Appalachian. It was easy to get fired up. It was easy to be part of the team. And with the goals and what we're doing and going forward, I was just fortunate enough that they let me be in the room. And one of the things that's important to me is that each and every one of us are blessed in many different ways. I am overly blessed. I think I've gone to that well many, many times. And so it's extremely important for me to give back. When you get to that point where you can help, you got to help. If we don't help each other out, we're never gonna accomplish anything. And it just feels right. And just the way I've always been, and now I'm in a position where I'm fortunate that I can actually do it. So I think the highest honor that you can receive as an alumni of Appalachian State is to receive the Distinguished Alumni Award. And the fact that I am being given that award is mind-blowing to me, because obviously my path, my journey, my 19-year-old self would have never seen this moment coming. To be able to accept this award, to be able to be in the company that I'm in. When Sherry called me and said, "Congratulations, you're the award winner this year," I said, "You're kidding." I read our magazine that comes out. I read these stories of these great alumni and some of the things they've accomplished, and I have a passion for Appalachian State, but what I've done doesn't compare, and I am in awe of those people. I'm in awe of the predecessors that have won this award, and I'm honored to be in that club. So I'll be sitting in the back of the room just in awe the whole time. I am truly honored.
When one arrives in Boone, you pretty quickly feel embraced by the mountains. The same thing happens here at the university. When you are a student here at the College of Business, you're embraced by the Appalachian community.
The name Appalachian State University, it means something and it connects with people. The experience goes beyond academics. There's a culture here. Everywhere I go, I wear that golden A. I take pride in that. It's not something that you find everywhere.
One of the things that's great about Appalachian is it has the resources of a big school, but the small school community.
Professors here take such an important view of how they can impact the lives of students.
That's the reason why we're here, supporting the students, seeing that they're successful both in their time here and then as they graduate.
We have a remarkable connection between faculty and students.
We have some of the leading voices in the field, so it really creates an intellectually vibrant environment.
We have the smaller class sizes, we've got high faculty engagement, and it really sets us apart.
These students are phenomenal. These students are, in my opinion, going to be the change seekers and change makers in the world. Not only through their professional skills, but also because of the passion they have got for making this world a better place.
A lot of people think of school as coming to the classroom and then going home and doing homework. At the Walker College, it's not like that.
We're really trying to rethink how we deliver education, what the purpose of education is. Really trying to break that hierarchy of the professor being out in front with all the great ideas and instead saying, you know what, everybody has great ideas.
They're figuring out those solutions through innovative thinking, through an innovative process.
Innovation is the edge. We are trying very hard to push our students to think in ways that they can not only think outside the box, but what kind of positive impacts they will be able to make in the world.
Having these different opportunities really sets our college apart.
We're trying to prepare the leaders of tomorrow by giving them ways of thinking about problems so they come up with solutions that are meaningful.
The students hit the ground running. They are the most technically competent, ready to go day one students. You know, when you get out into the business environment, that's the attitude you have to have.
Hiring an Appalachian graduate, as an employer, I know that I've got someone who can come in and hit the ground running.
One of the phrases you'll hear used often in the College of Business is business for good. We want our students going out in the world and helping to make it better by using business practices that can help.
I'm thankful for the transformational experience that Appalachian has given me. This college has shaped me both as a person and I think a servant leader.
Being a Mountaineer and being part of the Walker College of Business has shaped who I am today. I'm really excited to enter the workforce with the skills that I've gained here.
For me, Appalachian really represents family. You know, I don't know where I would be without my Appalachian experience. I'm proud to be a Mountaineer in so many ways.
Any student that comes out of the Walker College of Business is extraordinarily prepared to be successful and to make a difference in the world.
If you want to be able to work side by side with faculty, students, staff, community, partners, and industry, we want you to be part of our family.